His lawyer leaned in and whispered 5 words, just 5, and Vincent's face, that smug, self-satisfied face I had stared at across the breakfast table for 15 years, went completely white. His hands started trembling. The papers he had been so eager to sign were shaking like leaves in a storm, and me, for the first time in 3 years, I smiled. Welcome to my channel. My channel name is The Revenge Room. My name is Alexis Dunst. I'm 34 years old, and until 3 months ago, I was married to a man who believed he had outplayed me at every turn. He was wrong. But to understand why that moment in the courtroom mattered so much, you need to understand how we got there. Because this is not just a divorce story. This is the story of a woman who spent 3 years playing a game her husband didn't even know had started. I met Vincent when I was 17. I had graduated high school early, not out of genius, but out of sheer determination to get out of my parents' house. I landed a job as a file clerk at Henderson and Price law firm. Minimum wage, maximum paper cuts, but it was mine. By 18, I had worked my way up to legal assistant. I was good with details, good with numbers, and very good at keeping my mouth shut and my eyes open. Vincent was 24 when we met at a client event. He was charming, ambitious, and talked about the future like it had already agreed to show up for him. He said he was going to build something incredible. I said I would help him file the paperwork. Romance, right? We married when I was 19. Our son Tyler came along when I was 20. I kept working at the firm part-time, building my 401k, saving every spare dollar because my grandmother had one rule she passed down to me like scripture: a woman should have her own money. Not secret money, she would always clarify, just her own, something nobody could take. At 23, Vincent's real estate business finally took off, and he asked me to quit the law firm and join him full-time. He needed someone to manage the books, handle clients, coordinate contractors, someone he could trust completely. So I became his unpaid everything: bookkeeper, office manager, client liaison, interior decorator for model homes, marketing coordinator, event planner. I did all of it while raising Tyler, managing the household, and somehow keeping everyone fed and reasonably happy. My official title was wife. My unofficial title was every single thing that actually kept the business alive. For 11 years, I poured myself into building Vincent's dream, and for 11 years, he got the awards, the recognition, the credit. At every industry event, I was introduced as Vincent's wife. At every celebration, he thanked his team, his mentors, his vision, but somehow never quite got around to thanking me. Then the shift happened. He started making decisions without consulting me, started staying late more and more, started criticizing small things: the way I dressed, the meals I cooked, my so-called lack of ambition. Lack of ambition. I was running his entire back office for free while raising his son and keeping his life organized, but sure, not ambitious enough. Then one Tuesday evening, 3 months ago, he came home while I was making dinner, his favorite, because I am apparently a glutton for unappreciated effort, and he sat me down at the kitchen table with a look on his face that wasn't sad or apologetic, it was businesslike. He said, "I want a divorce," he said. "I want the house, the cars, the business, everything. You can keep Tyler." He said it like he was ordering off a menu. "I'll have the assets, hold the child." He dismissed our 15-year-old son like a leftover pizza. What would you do if the person you trusted most in the world looked at you like that? Let me know in the comments, because what came next changed everything. What Vincent didn't know in that moment was that I had found something 3 years earlier, something buried deep in his own financial records, something he was absolutely certain was hidden forever, and I had spent every single day since, quietly, patiently preparing for exactly this moment.
The day after Vincent dropped his bomb, his mother showed up, Lorraine Mercer. A woman who had treated me like the hired help for 15 years arrived with her perfectly styled hair and her perfectly practiced sympathy face. She patted my hand and told me I should have tried harder to keep him happy. "Men have needs, dear," she said, like she was explaining something complicated to a slow child. Lorraine's marital advice was always fascinating, considering her own husband spent 7 days a week on the golf course specifically to avoid being in the same room as her. But sure, I was the problem. Within a week, Vincent had moved me to the guest room. He had documents drawn up, settlements proposed, timelines established. Everything was moving fast, and from the outside, I looked like a woman drowning. But I had one person I thought I could trust through all of it. Diane Holloway. 20 years of friendship, through boyfriends, breakups, babies, and everything in between. She was the first person I called after Vincent's announcement, always checking in, always ready to listen, always asking how I was holding up. Except something felt off. Little things at first. When I mentioned to Diane I was thinking about fighting for the house, Tyler came home the next day saying his dad had told him it wouldn't work. When I told Diane I was looking at apartments in a specific neighborhood, Vincent made a casual comment about that exact area being too expensive for me. Then it clicked. Looking back, I should have seen it years ago. The way Diane lit up whenever Vincent walked into a room, the way she laughed at his jokes just a little too hard, always asking about him first whenever we spoke. How's Vincent? How's the business? Is Vincent happy? She had been carrying a torch for my husband for 15 years, and Vincent, because he collected admirers the way some people collect stamps, knew exactly how to use it. He made her feel special, important, chosen, probably implied they'd get together once the divorce was done, gave her just enough hope to keep her loyal. My best friend was his spy. 20 years of friendship sold out for some flirting and empty promises. At least charge more, Diane. But the worst part wasn't Vincent, wasn't Lorraine, wasn't even Diane. The worst part was Tyler. My son saw everything. The girlfriend, the grandmother packing my bags in garbage bags, not boxes, garbage bags like I was trash being taken out. He watched his father look at me like I had already disappeared. And Vincent was working on him, dripping poison slowly. Your mom is making this difficult. I just want everyone to be happy. She's dragging this out. Tyler started pulling away from me, not angry, just distant and confused. And watching my son look at me like I was the problem, that was the knife. That was the only wound that actually bled. Meanwhile, Vincent brought Brittany Sawyer around, 27, worked at his company, Instagram perfect highlights and yoga pants that cost more than my weekly groceries. She walked into my kitchen like she owned it, wore my grandmother's apron while making smoothies in my blender. Then she painted my kitchen gray. I had spent 3 weeks choosing that sage green, 3 weeks of paint samples and lighting tests. She painted over it with builder-grade gray, like it meant nothing. Very fitting, actually, gray like her future with Vincent once she found out the truth. Now, here is where the story really begins. 3 years before the divorce, on a random Tuesday night, Vincent was working late. Again, and I was going through the company books, reconciling accounts, doing the unglamorous work that kept his business alive. And I found something strange, a transfer to an account I didn't recognize, then another, then a pattern, money flowing out into places I had never seen. I stayed up until 3 in the morning following the trail, and what I found made my blood run cold. Our beautiful house, the one everyone admired, the one Vincent loved to show off, had 3 mortgages on it. The original loan of $400,000, a second mortgage of $350,000 taken out 4 years prior, a third mortgage of another $350,000 taken out 2 years after that. Total owed, $1.1 million. Actual value of everything? Maybe $850,000. We were underwater by $250,000 on a home I thought we owned outright. Where are you watching this from right now? Because I want you to sit with that number for a second, because it gets so much worse. The business was drowning too. Lines of credit maxed at $200,000, back taxes of $85,000, vendor debts of $120,000, equipment loans of $75,000. The company Vincent bragged about at every dinner party, it was sinking under nearly $500,000 of debt. The cars?
all leased, balloon payments coming due. We didn't own anything, we just had very expensive monthly obligations. And the money? Where had it all gone? Cryptocurrency investments, $180,000, all lost. Gambling, $75,000, gone. A secret apartment rented for a woman I didn't know about, $60,000 in rent and furnishings. Watches, suits, trips I was never invited on, another $85,000. My husband wasn't building an empire, he was building a house of cards, with borrowed cards that were also on fire. Total debt? $2.9 million. Total actual value of everything? Maybe $1.6 million. We were $300,000 in the hole, and Vincent had no idea I knew a single thing about it.
My first instinct was to confront him, to scream, to cry, to demand answers at the top of my lungs. But I knew Vincent. I had watched him operate for 15 years. If I confronted him, he would manipulate me, explain it away, make me feel crazy for questioning him. He would probably find a way to blame me for it. And worse, if he knew I knew, he might go after the one thing I had protected my entire marriage. See, I had always kept a little something of my own. My grandmother's voice playing on a loop in the back of my mind. A woman should have her own money. My IRA from my law firm years, I had rolled it over when I quit, never touched it, and by then it had grown to about $180,000. That was mine, earned before the marriage, separate property under the law. Then there was my inheritance. My grandmother passed when I was 28 and left me $340,000. Her will was specific and deliberate. This money is for Alexis alone. I had kept it in a completely separate account for 6 years, never commingling it with Vincent's finances, never using it for household expenses. My grandmother kept her own account for 50 years, she always said. Not secret money, just mine. Smartest woman I ever knew. So I did not confront Vincent. Instead, I protected everything. I worked with my uncle, a retired accountant, to create an irrevocable trust for Tyler. My IRA and my inheritance, $520,000 in total, went into that trust. My name wasn't on it as a beneficiary. Vincent's name certainly wasn't anywhere near it. It existed for one purpose: Tyler's future. College, a first home, emergencies. And it was completely, legally, utterly untouchable. Then I documented everything. Every mortgage document, every hidden account, every suspicious transaction. I printed copies and kept them at my sister's house, put more copies in a safe deposit box, saved everything on an encrypted drive. And then I waited. I knew Vincent would leave eventually. Men like him always do. They get bored, find someone younger, decide they deserve more. I just had to be ready when it happened. 3 years of waiting. 3 years of watching him dig the hole deeper, while I smiled at dinner parties, knowing our entire life was built on quicksand. I got very good at patience, and very good at pretending I had no idea my husband was financially drowning us both. When Vincent finally asked for the divorce, when he sat at that kitchen table and demanded the house, the cars, the business, everything, I almost laughed out loud. He wasn't asking for assets. He was demanding debt. He just didn't know it yet. I hired a lawyer named Nina Castellano, recommended by my old firm. 52 years old, sharp as a razor, absolutely zero tolerance for nonsense. She reviewed my situation and laid out the battle plan immediately. "You helped build this business," she said. "You're entitled to half of everything. The house, the company, the accounts. We fight." I looked at her for a long moment and said, "What if I don't want to fight?" Nina stared at me like I had suggested we send Vincent a thank you card and a fruit basket. She thought I was broken, beaten down, too exhausted to stand up for myself. She had absolutely no idea what I was about to put on her desk. I moved into a small apartment with Tyler. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen the size of my old pantry. Half our boxes didn't even fit. They sat stacked in the corner of Tyler's room like a monument to how far we had fallen. Meanwhile, Vincent was posting photos with Brittany. New chapter, new energy, blessed.
Lorraine commented underneath, "So happy for you, sweetheart. You deserve joy." My sister called, furious, telling me to get a shark lawyer and take him for everything. Everyone had advice. Everyone saw a woman who had given up. Everyone was watching me and seeing defeat. Good, because here is the thing about being underestimated. People stop watching you. They stop being careful. They stop guarding their secrets. And that is exactly when you learn everything you still need to know. What would you have done in my position? Would you have confronted him the moment you found out, or would you have waited? Tell me in the comments, because the next move I made is the one that changed everything. I sat across from Nina Castellano and placed 3 binders on her desk. 3 years of evidence, every mortgage document, every loan statement, every hidden account, every transaction I had traced. She read in silence for almost an hour. When she finally looked up, her expression had completely transformed. "You've known about this for 3 years?" I was waiting for him to leave, I told her. I knew he would eventually, and when he demanded everything, he demanded all the debt. He just doesn't understand that yet. Nina leaned back in her chair. The pity was gone from her eyes. The concern had evaporated. What replaced it was something that looked very much like awe. "So when you sign over the assets," she said slowly, "you walk away clean. He gets the mortgages, the business debts, the lease obligations, all of it becomes his sole responsibility. And your inheritance, your retirement account, separate property, never commingled, legally protected, sitting safely in a trust for your son." Nina was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled, a slow, dangerous smile. "Mrs. Dunst," she said, "I believe I owe you an apology. I thought you had given up." I smiled back. Everyone thinks that. That is kind of the point. She went from looking at me like a lost kitten to looking at me like a grand chess master. I prefer grandmaster. Better outfit.
The trap was already built. The numbers were verified, the documentation was airtight. All I had to do now was let Vincent think he was winning. And nobody does Gracious Loser better than a woman who has been practicing for 15 years. The next 3 months were a masterclass in acting. I became exactly what everyone expected me to be: broken, defeated, barely holding on. I showed up to mediation sessions with red eyes and trembling hands. I spoke softly, hesitantly, like a woman who had lost every drop of her confidence. I asked for so little that even the mediator seemed uncomfortable. "I just want enough to start over," I said during our second session. "I'm not trying to be difficult. I know the business is his life's work. I know the house means everything to him. I don't want to tear our family apart more than it already is." I requested a settlement of $50,000 cash, my personal belongings, and shared custody of Tyler. That was it. Vincent agreed immediately, probably expecting me to fight for half of everything, like any reasonable lawyer would demand. Instead, I was asking for crumbs, and he looked at me across that mediation table with something almost like pity. Like I was a wounded animal he was graciously putting out of its misery. I deserved an Oscar for that performance, the role of a lifetime, and my only audience was my lying, soon-to-be bankrupt ex-husband. With each passing week, Vincent's arrogance swelled. He stopped being careful. He started telling his golf buddies that I hadn't even fought, that he had offered a fair settlement and I had taken it without a word. Lorraine was even worse, bragging at her book club, her church group, every social gathering she attended. "Vincent is keeping everything. That woman didn't get a dime. I always knew she wasn't strong enough for my son." To celebrate his upcoming victory, Vincent bought himself a $15,000 watch. I know because I saw the charge on the business account. Still using company money for personal expenses, still digging the hole deeper. He wore it to our next mediation session and made sure I noticed. He also took Brittany to La Maison, the French restaurant where we had celebrated our 10th anniversary, and posted photos. Life is good when you're with the right person. He meant the person who didn't know about his debt yet. Meanwhile, Diane kept calling, fishing for information under the guise of friendship. "How are you holding up?" she would ask, her voice soaked in fake concern. "I just want it to be over," I would tell her, letting my voice crack slightly. "I can't fight anymore. I don't have the energy." Within hours, Vincent would know. I could practically see him relaxing, lowering his guard even further. Diane thought she was playing me. She was actually just an unpaid messenger service. But while the adults were busy playing their games, Tyler was watching, and my son, my smart, observant, wonderful son, was starting to notice things that did not add up. He noticed his dad's new $15,000 watch, but heard Vincent say they couldn't afford the school trip to Washington, D.C. He noticed Brittany's shopping bags piling up in the foyer, but heard Vincent complain that money was tight. One evening, Tyler came to my small apartment and sat down at my second-hand kitchen table with those serious eyes, so much like his father's, but carrying something Vincent had lost long ago: honesty. "Mom," he said quietly, "is Dad actually rich?" I looked at my son for a long moment. "What do you think?" He was quiet, processing. "I think something's not right. I think he's pretending." I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "Trust me," I said. "Just wait a little longer." My 15-year-old had figured out what 2 lawyers and a certified accountant had missed. I should bill his college fund for consulting fees. Behind the scenes, Nina was preparing our legal strategy with surgical precision. The main divorce agreement stated clearly that I was relinquishing all claims to marital property. The house, the business, the vehicles, everything would transfer to Vincent. In exchange, I would receive my modest cash settlement and walk away. But attached to that agreement was an addendum, a detailed liability disclosure statement. Every debt, every mortgage, every loan, every obligation tied to those assets, listed in plain, unambiguous language. When Vincent signed for all the assets, he would be legally assuming every single liability. The mortgages would become his sole responsibility. The business debts would transfer entirely to him. The lease obligations on every car would be his problem alone. Legal, proper, and absolutely devastating. 2 weeks before the final hearing, Vincent's lawyer, Harold Whitfield, called Nina with concerns. "My client is assuming significant assets," Harold said carefully. "I'd like to request a full financial audit before we finalize." Nina kept her voice perfectly neutral. "Of course," she said, "we'll provide whatever documentation you need." But when Harold brought this to Vincent, my soon-to-be ex-husband shut it down without a second thought. "No audits. I built that company. I know exactly what it's worth. I'm not paying some accountant to tell me what I already know." Harold pushed back firmly. He had been practicing law for over 30 years and knew exactly when a client was about to make a catastrophic mistake. He presented Vincent with a waiver, a document acknowledging that Harold had recommended an independent financial review and that Vincent was declining against counsel's advice. He signed it without reading it. Never underestimate the power of an impatient girlfriend to make a man skip the fine print. Brittany was worth millions to me in legal strategy alone. The night before the hearing, Vincent sent me a text message. "Thank you for not making this ugly." I stared at those words for a long time. 15 years of marriage, 15 years of building his business, raising his son, managing his entire life, and he was thanking me for not making things difficult while he threw me away. I typed back, "I just want what's best for Tyler." What was best for Tyler, a trust fund worth $520,000, safe and untouchable, and a father who was about to learn the most expensive lesson of his life. Nina called me that evening. "Thursday at 9. Judge Patricia Holden. Are you ready?" I looked around my small apartment, the secondhand furniture, the boxes finally unpacked, the tiny kitchen I had painted sage green because it reminded me of hope. "I've been ready for 3 years," I told her.
Thursday, April 17th, 9 in the morning, courtroom 4B. Vincent arrived first. Charcoal Armani, new watch catching the light, shaking hands with Harold like a man about to close the deal of his life. Brittany waited in the hallway, scrolling her phone like this was just another boring appointment on a busy day. Lorraine sat in the gallery already planning the celebratory lunch, and when I walked in, she gave me that smile, the kind you give someone you have already beaten. I arrived in a simple navy dress, no jewelry, hair pulled back, looking tired and completely defeated. Perfect. I looked like a woman who had given up on life and fashion simultaneously. I should really teach acting classes. The curriculum would be outstanding. Judge Patricia Holden entered and everyone rose. 30 years on the family court bench, silver hair, reading glasses, and absolutely zero tolerance for nonsense. She had seen every trick divorcing couples could throw at her, and nothing surprised her anymore. Harold spoke first. My client, Vincent Mercer, is assuming all marital assets, the family residence, the business, and all vehicles. In exchange, Mrs. Dunst receives $50,000. Nina rose beside me. My client agrees to relinquish all claims and accepts the settlement terms. Judge Holden studied my face carefully. Mrs. Dunst, you are giving up your claim to a home and a business you helped build for over a decade. Are you certain this is what you want? I kept my voice soft and slightly unsteady. Yes, Your Honor, I just want my husband to have everything he asked for. She held her gaze on me for a long moment, visibly wrestling with whether to intervene. But I was represented by counsel, answering clearly, an adult woman making her own choice. Very well, she said. Let's proceed. Vincent signed eagerly without reading a single word, and he even checked his phone mid-signing. Harold, however, did what experienced lawyers always do, reviewed the complete package one final time. Main agreement signed, asset schedule signed, settlement terms signed. Then he turned the page and reached the addendum, the liability disclosure statement. I watched his face carefully as he read, watched confusion flicker across his features, watched him flip back a page hoping he had misread something. He had not. Harold leaned toward Vincent, voice tight and urgent. Sir, you are assuming all the debt, every mortgage, every business lien, personal liability for all of it. For the first time that morning, Vincent actually read what he had signed. House, $1.1 million owed, market value $850,000, business debts $480,000, vehicle leases $115,000, total debt $1.9 million, net value of everything he had just claimed, negative $300,000. He had not won the lottery, he had won the invoice for it. Vincent shot to his feet, chair scraping hard against the courtroom floor. This is not right. She hid this from me. This is fraud. Judge Holden did not blink. Mr. Mercer, sit down. He sat, hands trembling, every trace of his confident smile erased. The judge fixed him with a stare that could cut steel. These are debts tied directly to assets in your name, your mortgages, your business obligations. Are you telling this court you do not know your own financial situation? Harold quietly placed the waiver on the table, the document Vincent had signed without reading 2 weeks earlier, confirming in plain language that he had refused an independent financial audit against his lawyer's explicit advice. Judge Holden reviewed it without expression. You had every opportunity to investigate. You chose not to. You signed a waiver acknowledging that choice. The agreement stands. The gavel came down like the closing of a vault. Vincent turned to me one last time, desperation fully breaking through what remained of his composure. You knew, he said, voice cracking. You knew about all of this the entire time. I met his eyes calmly, without anger, without flinching. I was your bookkeeper for 11 years, Vincent. I knew about everything. I stood, smoothed my dress, picked up my purse, and walked out without looking back once. In the hallway, Brittany had heard everything through the glass doors. I watched her face shift as reality landed. The wealthy, successful man she had built her plans around simply did not exist. She was gone before I reached the elevator, heels clicking fast on the marble floor, not looking back. The collapse came quickly. Within 2 weeks, she had moved out of the house entirely. Within a month, Vincent was trying to sell a property worth $250,000 less than its combined mortgages, with no buyers and banks calling about missed payments. Within 3 months, he was sitting across from bankruptcy attorneys. Lorraine's Christmas newsletter that year was unusually brief. Vincent is exploring new opportunities. Yes, specifically in debt restructuring and calling relatives to ask for loans.
A month after the divorce, Tyler sat with me at my second-hand kitchen table and looked at me with those serious, honest eyes that always reminded me of his father, but carried something Vincent had lost completely: integrity. "You waited 3 years," he said quietly. "You knew the whole time and you just waited." "I needed to make sure you were protected first," I told him. "Before anything else, your future had to be safe." He processed that in silence for a moment. Then he hugged me, really hugged me, the kind I had not felt from my 15-year-old son in months, the kind that said, "I understand everything now," the kind that said, "I am proud of you." 15-year-old boys do not hug their mothers voluntarily very often. I knew without question I had done something right. My settlement covered rent, a security deposit, and furniture that was genuinely mine for years. The trust fund stayed exactly where it was, $520,000, untouchable, Tyler's future locked and secured. And me, I enrolled in interior design courses at the community college, the dream I had quietly shelved at 23 to build someone else's empire. I was finally, deliberately building my own. Patience is not just a virtue, it's a complete strategy. And a woman who has spent her entire life being underestimated is the most dangerous person in any room. Thank you so much for staying until the very end. It genuinely means everything to me. If this story gave you even one moment of satisfaction, hit that like button and subscribe to The Revenge Room. More stories are waiting, and trust me, you do not want to miss what comes next.